The age-old saying, "crime doesn't pay," does not apply to these people. Today's list is on the 10 richest criminal billionaires. Number 10. El Chapo. Joaquin Guzman, also known as El Chapo, is one of the world's most infamous criminals. He's also one of the world's wealthiest. El Chapo has been called the most powerful drug trafficker in the world by the U.S. Department of Treasury. Chapo is the head of the Sinaloa cartel. His cartel has brought a staggering amount of drugs into the U.S. In fact, El Chapo and his cartel have brought in a quarter of the illegal drugs found in the U.S. His wealth has also afforded him the opportunity to evade the authorities. El Chapo has escaped prison twice, once through an elaborate and expensive tunnel. It's hard to gauge exactly how much El Chapo is worth, but experts claim that it is well over $1 billion. Number 9. Leona Helmsley. As known as the Queen of Mean because of her tyrannical behavior, Leona Helmsley is a New York real estate mogul and criminal who didn't believe in paying taxes. In fact, she's been quoted as saying, "Taxes are something only the little people pay." Her and her husband owned a number of luxury New York real estate, including the Empire State Building and the Flatiron Building. But in 1989, her refusal to pay taxes caught up with her, and she was convicted of a number of tax-related charges, including extortion. Her criminal behavior earned her a hefty paycheck, though. At the time of her conviction, she was worth $2 billion. Number 8. George Jung. George Jung and his drug smuggling empire was made famous when Jung was portrayed by Johnny Depp in the feature film Blow. Born in Boston, Jung became one of the most successful cocaine smugglers of the 1970s and 1980s. Jung was arrested in 1987, but he skipped bail and settled down in Kansas, content to live the life of a fugitive. It didn't last long, though. Jung was caught again in 1994, and he had 1,700 pounds of cocaine in his possession. Jung's criminal behavior landed him in prison. He was sentenced to 60 years, but was released after serving only 20 of them. At the time of his arrest, Jung was worth well over $100 million. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe to Daily Top 10s with notifications on so you don't miss any of our videos. Number 7. Dennis Kozlowski. Kozlowski is one of the biggest and bravest embezzlers the world has ever seen. During only a 2-year time frame from 1999 to 2001, Kozlowski awarded himself $81 million in unauthorized bonuses. He was the CEO of Tyco International, which was a security and fire protection company based out of New Jersey. Kozlowski, also known as Piggy, spent his money as quickly as he could embezzle it, splurging on yachts and luxury New York real estate. He was, though, convicted of embezzlement. He was sentenced to 25 years at the Mid-State Correctional Facility in New York, although he was conditionally released in 2014. Number 6. Griselda Blanco. When you think of billionaire criminals, you often think of men, but Griselda Blanco was a powerful criminal with a billionaire bank account to match. Blanco made her fortune working as a Colombian drug lord for the Medellin cartel. She was at the forefront of the cocaine drug trade in Miami in the 1950s. Some people believed she even pioneered the trade herself. She was a hardened criminal, quick to get rid of anyone who stood in her way. As such, she was responsible for the murders of more than 200 people involved in drug smuggling from Colombia to New York. This earned her the nickname the Black Widow. Blanco was killed in 2012 at the age of 69. She was one of the wealthiest criminals in the world, with a net worth of over $2 billion. Number 5. Frank Lucas. Frank Lucas was an infamous Harlem drug lord. His life of crime had somewhat modest beginnings, though. He began his criminal activities with petty theft and pool hustling. From there, though, he became a force to be reckoned with, and is one of the most famous drug lords of the 1970s. He had unique ways of smuggling drugs. It's been rumored that he smuggled drugs into the U.S. in the coffins of Vietnam War soldiers. His story inspired the blockbuster movie American Gangster. He was arrested 18 times throughout his life, but he was only ever convicted 3 times. And although his net worth was well over $52 million, experts believe that he was actually worth a lot more because he had money stashed away and hidden. Number 4. Meyer Lansky. Meyer Lansky made his criminal fortune by working as an accountant for the mob. Lansky was an integral part of mob activity, and together with his friend Bugsy Siegel, he helped to develop Las Vegas into the gambling empire that it is today. He also helped develop the National Crime Syndicate. He was very creative with his money laundering, using a variety of casinos and Swiss bank accounts. But Lansky was charged in 1970 for tax evasion. He didn't want to go to prison, so he tried to emigrate to Israel. It didn't work, and Lansky was forced to face his convictions. He wasn't sentenced to prison, though. Instead, he was acquitted because his health had deteriorated. He died in 1983 of lung cancer, with only $35,000 in his bank account. But during his peak, Lansky was worth well over $400 million. Number 3. Anthony Salerno. In 1989, Fortune magazine called Anthony Salerno the most powerful and wealthiest gangster in America. Nicknamed Fat Tony, Salerno was worth close to $1 billion. He made his money several different ways. He was a loan shark, charging huge interest rates on any money lent. He was notorious for committing casino fraud, and he is most famous for his mafia tax, which he charged on various construction sites throughout New York City. His life of crime caught up with him, though. Salerno was eventually convicted of 2 separate federal cases of racketeering. The first sentence was for 100 years, and the second sentence was for 70 years. Salerno died in prison in 1992 from complications of a stroke, but his infamy lives on. He is often shown in pictures wearing his telltale t-shirt and fedora. Number 2. Al Capone. Al Capone's name is synonymous with criminal billionaires. Capone is one of the most famous criminals that ever lived. Capone, or Scarface as he's more commonly called, earned unprecedented amounts of criminal money in his heyday. Capone was famous during the Prohibition era, when booze was prohibited in the U.S. Capone bootlegged illegal liquor into the country, and he made a fortune doing it. Capone's net worth sat around $1.3 billion at its peak, and although he is widely known for his wealth, Capone is also famous for his attempt to kill Bugs Moran, head of the North Side Gang. He was also responsible for the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, where 7 members of the North Side Gang were lined up and shot in broad daylight. Capone was never convicted of the many crimes he committed. He was very powerful, and as such, he was extremely hard to catch and convict. However, the authorities finally got Capone for tax evasion. Capone served 6 years in prison, which isn't really that much considering the crimes he committed. He was released in 1947, but his freedom was short-lived. Capone died of a heart attack on January 25, 1947, shortly after his release. Number 1. Pablo Emilio Escobar. The King of Cocaine, as he's colloquially named, is one of the most infamous criminals that ever lived. He is also one of the wealthiest. In fact, by the time Pablo Escobar celebrated his 35th birthday, he was one of the richest men in the world. Like many of his criminal counterparts, Escobar made his billions by smuggling drugs into the U.S. But he did it in such staggering numbers that it can be hard to actually understand how much drugs Escobar brought in. Experts suggest that Escobar was responsible for 80% of the cocaine brought into the U.S. during the 1980s. They also believe that, at one point, Pablo Escobar was bringing in a staggering $420 million worth of drugs per week. No one knows for sure exactly how much money Escobar made in his lifetime, but in 1989, Forbes magazine estimated that he was worth $3 billion, so they named him one of the world's top billionaires, even though he was a criminal. However, other experts have suggested that Escobar was worth a lot more than that. They think it was closer to upwards of $30 billion. Escobar bought a lot of property with his money, including numerous safe houses. He was eventually caught, convicted, and sentenced to La Catedral, but he quickly escaped and went on the run. He was found 16 months later. Escobar died in an epic shootout. Escobar is clearly one of the richest criminals that ever lived. which has secured him the top spot on this list of the 10 richest criminals. Check out our previous videos on the top 10 luckiest people in the world and the top 10 greatest entrepreneurs who shaped the world. And remember to subscribe to Daily Top 10s with notifications on so you don't miss any of our videos.